This is a lesson for Wednesday 120. We are now entering the second semester, which means we are talking about different types of functions, specifically radical functions, things with roots, square roots, third roots, fourth roots. So we're going to start with the concept of rational exponents. And a rational exponent is an exponent that is a fraction. So you can see here in this rule, I have a to the m over n. It's a little blurry, I'll rewrite it here. And so the exponent is a fraction or a rational number. So when you have an exponent that's a fraction, and they spell it out in great detail.
All juniors, your suborders.
And you don't need this part right here necessarily, but this is what it is. So a to the m over n equals the nth root of a raised to the m power. And what that means basically is the denominator of the exponent is your, what we call index number. This is called the index, the radical. So like a square root would have an index of 2. We don't write the 2, but there's an unseen 2 there. Cubed root has an index of 3. Fourth root has an index of 4. And so the denominator is the index, and the numerator is the exponent. So just a simple example, something like 3 to the 4/5 would equal the 5th root of 3 to the 4th power. Notice the denominator is your index number, the numerator is your exponent. Okay, and that's what this rule means. All right, so let's move on to a couple examples here. I'm not going to do all of these in this document, but something like this, where I take 16 to the 3/2 power. 16 to the 3/2 power is, and we're not going to do this rational form, we're going to do the radical form, the second root of 16 raised to the 3rd power, or the square root. Now, when I say second root, that's the same thing as a square root. We just don't ever write the 2, so it's like an unseen 2 when you write a square root. Okay, so it's the square root of 16 to the 3rd power. Why? Because the denominator of the exponent is a 2, so that's your index, unseen, and the numerator is 3, so that's your exponent. So the square root of 16 to the 3rd power. Square root of 16 is 4, so we do the radical first, and then we do the exponent second. So then 4 to the 3rd is 64. 4 times 4 times 4. Let's do 32 to the negative 3/5. And so we're going to rewrite this as the 5th root, because 5 is the denominator, of 32 raised to the negative 3 power. Now, a negative exponent means reciprocal. You should know that from Algebra 1. That's why we have this denominator down here. Okay? So, I have the 5th root of 32 to the negative 3. We'll deal with that in a moment. The 5th root of 32 is 2. That's why I had you memorize those numbers from that list before, well, I guess back at Thanksgiving. You need to know these. 5th root of 32 is 2, and I raise it to the negative 3 power. And again, a negative exponent means reciprocal. They did the reciprocal at the beginning. I'm going to do it here at the end. So 2 to the 3rd power is 8, but because it's a negative exponent, it's 1 over 8, or the reciprocal. All right. So rules of exponents, you need to know those. So if you didn't do very well with those in Algebra 1, you're going to have to brush those up. Let's go on to the next example. The next example has a solving equation. How does that work out? Let's just start with the first one. 4x to the 5th equals 128. And so 4x to the 5th, how would I solve this? We're solving by square roots, only they're not square roots anymore. They could be a 5th root or a 4th root or a 3rd root. But it's still the same thing as before. We're solving using roots. It's just not necessarily the square root. But it's the same as solving by square roots from earlier this year. And the first step I would take here, following reverse order of operations. Reverse order of operations. The first step I would take is divide by 4. So if I divide both sides by 4, 128 divided by 4 is 32. I get x to the 5th equals 32. And then to get rid of the 5th power, I need to take the 5th root. Just like to get rid of x squared, I would take a square root. To get rid of the 5th power, I take the 5th root of both sides. So x equals the 5th root of 32, which is just 2. All right, let's take a look at the next example. Again, we're following reverse order of operations. So parentheses comes last. Is there anything to add and subtract? No. Multiply and divide? No. I do have an exponent to deal with. So the first thing I'm going to do is take the 4th root of both sides. That gets rid of the 4th power. Those cancel each other out. So x minus 3 just stays x minus 3 because these exponents cancel each other out. What I have is the 4th root of 21. And because it's an even root, all even roots, just like square roots, need plus minus. So what I have is plus or minus the 4th root of 21. Now how would I solve? Inside parentheses, I solve by adding 3 to both sides. This is very similar to what we've done earlier this year. We're just doing it with higher roots instead of just square roots. So when I add 3 over, I get 3 plus or minus the 4th root of 21. 3 plus the 4th root of 21, 3 minus. These are the exact answers, and that's what I want. Could I need the decimal answer for that? Sure. Then you just type it into the calculator to get the decimal answers. But for right now, unless I tell you to give me the decimals, I want the exact answers for now. Okay? All right. There's also one problem at the end of the homework. I'll let you look at this example, and it's just simply plug and chug. This is more complex than the one that's in the homework. But all you need to do for these problems is take the numbers from the problem, put them into the appropriate letters, and they tell you which letter is which in here. They identify what S is, what C is. Just plug them in and just evaluate it, and you can use your calculator. You don't even have to necessarily show any work. So for this one, it would be 1 minus S is the salvage value, which they said was $8,000. C is the original cost, which is $50,000. And N is the number of years, which is 10. So you would just plug this into your calculator and evaluate. Okay? You can stop and go back to the live session if you have questions or get started on your homework. Make sure you realize it is odds only for the homework. You don't have to do the evens unless you want to.